Hi everybody, it's Elena from Lakmus School. Today I'm going to tell you why do you need measurements and how to take them. Why do we use measurements at all? It happens that you are drawing and can't understand where the mistake is, whether this iron is too thick or it must be higher. Sometimes it takes many times to find the right decision. But if you can measure, you facilitate and speed up your work. Let's imagine you've got rectangular like this one, and you need to move it to the format A4. You can measure out squares of sheet for hours with a ruler, as to understand which scale to convert it to. But you can do it much easier. To remember proportions. Namely, we measure the shortest side and count how many times it will fit in the longest one. In this case, we get two non-full sizes. Here, it's very important to know to what extent. Let's imagine that my smallest size is 10 units, so I have as 5. I've got slightly more than a half, approximately 1.6 units. So, a bigger side has 1.6 of the smallest one. Remember this size. Now, it may seem very complicated, but if you try to do it with me, you will see how easy it is. Now, we place the smallest side on our format randomly. And we take the amount of times that we got from our measurements, which is 1.6. And we've got rectangular, but on a smaller scale. So, it's not necessary to measure it to millimeter, and you don't have to use a ruler at all. And now, let's look on measurements at live drawing. That is our object extend vertically. That means that we relate width to height. So, take a pencil, straighten your arm, and point at the object. Unless you straighten it, the distance to the subject will be different every time, and there will be lots of mistaken measurements. Then, catch the rightmost point of the object with the end of the pencil, and the leftmost one with the thumb, if you are right-handed, so you do it vice versa. Now turn your hand at 90 degrees. Count the amount of times the smallest side fits the biggest one in height, and remember it. Important, if you want to develop your sense of distance, firstly, do sketching, and only then take measurements. I'm checking the proportions on my sketch, and, if needed, I stretch the bottle out or make it thinner. You can measure some parts of the object. For example, a cube. You can measure the level of face's expansion. I'm taking the smallest one and fit it horizontally in the biggest one. Remember this proportion and put it on the sheet. Often happens that the person has measured an object and doesn't know what to do with these measurements, just looking at the pencil, having no clue how to put it on the sheet. So, don't measure only sizes, but also their ratio. Also, the topmost and bottommost points are not always placed collinear, like in this case with the cube. You don't need to tilt the pencil to catch these points, but it's important to catch them just by moving your hand. Next one, you can measure angles. Look at the lower cube face. It's located at the angle. And why it is so, you will find in our video about perspective. So, we direct our arm towards the object, turn the pencil, and catch the angle of the lower face. Now we need to transfer it to the drawing. By the way, there are several ways to measure angles. When we cross two pencils, one vertical and the other looks at the face's edge, or when two pencils are crossed towards horizontal faces. I am doing it with the help of one pencil. I don't enjoy having too many unnecessary objects, as it slows down the process. Attention! You should take measurements in the plane of the drawing board. It won't be helpful to pierce the sheet and direct the pencil along the cube face. You are transferring cubic volume to a plane. That's why you need to take measurements in plane. It's possible to take the same measurements with still life. That means that we measure the width of the whole still life to its height and apply this spot on the sheet. We check proportions one more time. And only now you can measure a certain object. You use the same method when drawing a head. You are measuring common width to its height. Then, to find out the angle of the head, you measure from the edge of the eye to the middle of the nose and count how many times this size will fit in the rest part of the head. Practice measurements at an early stage, check all details. So, over time, you will train your eye and you will have to take fewer and fewer measurements. Therefore, onward and upward. It was your measurer, Elena. Goodbye, everybody.